There are some new faces for some of you, and there are some old friends that I have been with for many years. What I'm going to do today is kind of a cheat, I guess. I'm going to play for you my keynote address to the Q Conference that I gave in New Orleans in 2016. Well, why? Why? The title of it is Imagining Q. And what I was trying to do simply was to think outside the box, think about familiar things in unfamiliar ways. And it's a 29-minute presentation. And then after that, we'll talk. So I start off saying this was made by humans and robots. And the question is, can we distinguish the humans from the robots? Can we separate the signal from the noise? Now, that's a big problem and a big question. And as it turns out, we know we can, because correlation of that data shows there are 14 different patterns, different sorts that create patterns. And then the balance, the other 10, make no pattern at all. So we have 7 pairs plus 11 robot sorts, which is that's my simulation for noise. Well, we can show some things about our Q sort, and we can show something. We can illustrate what a Q sort is in different ways. And what this slide shows is that we can take the traditional pyramid, and you can string those together as a string, ranging from one extreme to the other. And then, as everybody does in science, usually the first thing they do is do a scatter plot of their data. And when you do a scatter plot of a sort and connect the dots, you get a line, and I call that a sort line. It is a physical, visual representation of the sort. Well, you can take that a step further. You can also talk about proportionality. You can show the proportionality between the most liked to the most disliked, in this case, colors. And you can see that the sorts, excuse me, the statements at the two extremes are very important. And in fact, we see that just 6 of those 28 colors account for more than 50% of the data space, if you will, of that sort line. And we can also go further than that, and I call this in my presentation, this is probably, from my point of view, the least understood and least utilized tool available to Q researchers, and that is graphical representations of the data. And you see the examples here. It's 2 factors from this little study of Q of colors. Well, so sort lines. It's all the same thing. It's representing the same information in different ways. And we see that whenever we lay one on top of others, the high correlations, we can get a visual sense of how alike they are, and how what we think of as just a simple number, a correlation, is really an expression in that single number of these sort lines. We have 7 pairs again, and we have 11 robots. Well, as I said, there's 14 sorts in that data, and we can, since it's a color study, we can represent every one of them. This is the complete data set. Instead of showing it in terms of numbers and all, statement numbers, we show it in what one can think of as a proportional representation of the Q sort. And you see the sorts 1 and 2, both students from Brazil chose gray as their favorite color. They differ, however. One of them thought brown took brown is the one they disliked the most, and purple for the other. We can go across that whole thing and look at every single one of those sorts and compare them with each other directly. That's one reason why I call it the lab test, why I created the lab test as a way of making it easier for us to learn how to read our data. Remember, we're like radiologists. We have to learn how to read those scans. And that's true here. Well, what happens whenever you do that, not with with our little color study, but this represents the 3 Lipset factors. And you can see that factor A on the right, those on the right end, those are British values that they're are most positive about. And then American values, they're most negative about. Factor 2, it's a little bit more, it's almost the reverse of that, but not quite. And then there's factor 3. And so we can get a visual sense of what's going on inside these factors. That's important, I think, particularly that's an important ability, primarily because it gives us an opportunity to see the data rather than just read the data as numbers. Well, does that work for a big complicated study? Well, I think it does. I was involved with Shelley Whiteman. She's a professor on the medical faculty at the University of Washington, about burn survivors. It was a blind study. We had some demographic information about them. The question was, over a period of time, it spanned 3 years, over a period of time, what were the prevailing attitudes to be found amongst 50? There were 54 individuals, and there's 50 statements here. Well, I think that the names that we gave the factors reflect quite well what the study had to teach us. Factor A, I hurt right now, and that's represented on the right hand, the positive end, as both physical discomfort and some kind of a psychological issue. We're not psychologists. We didn't try to break that down. So then comes factor B. What am I to do now? And you can see physical pain is still there. Discomfort, physical issues. Factor C. What am I to do later? The pain is on the negative end, and what's on the positive end are psychological, or 2 different psychological issues. And again, we didn't attempt to break that down. Meanwhile, on the negative end comes the pain. They don't feel pain right then. They don't have physical issues. In factor D, I am afraid. Once again, we have a psychological issue, but significantly a financial matter and a family concern. But on the negative end, the physical issues are rejected. I think that's a glorious slide in a way, because it encapsulates in visual form an incredible amount of information regarding the 4 burn survivors factors. So, returning for a minute to the rotation. This is an example of why I think visualizing rotation is very useful. You notice that there is a sort that is circled, sort number 6, and the reason why it's circled is I wanted to point out that the Varimax solution all put person 6 on factor 1, and you'll notice it's unrotated. In its unrotated form, it was not quite on factor 1. It was just about where it is right this on these plots. Well, I decided not to rotate toward sort 6 and thereby make them a member of the Factor One group, a co-author for Factor One, but I had the advantage of being able to look at the data and see what it was that drew him toward that group. But it also gave me a chance to think a little bit about what was going on there. I don't have a pointer that I can show you here, but it's number 6. You can count it 2, 4, 6. It has different. It chose different colors than anybody else. It did. It was almost as if this person was colorblind. That's what I finally decided, and in fact, that remains a possibility. So now something you haven't seen before. We're simulating the Q sorting process. These are 2 women. One is American, one is Brazilian. And we're assuming that they're following our instruction to go to and fro from negative to positive to negative and sort toward the middle. Notice at this point, 67% of the Q sort space is accounted for. I think it's amazing. Look how similar these sorts are. Now we've accounted for 90% of the Q sort space. And we've only accounted for, let's count them, 3, 6, 9, 12 of the 28 colors. And just 12 accounted for 90%. Now that is a function of the instrumentality here, because remember we are factoring correlations. What we're really talking about here are the relationships here between these items in a very, I think, precise kind of way. Go ahead and fill in the rest of the blanks. So that's all of them. Uh-oh, there's nobody in the 0 pile. We've accounted for 100% of the Q sort space, but we still have 6 items that haven't been accounted for. Well, we know they're in the 0 pile. Why not? A point is just a point. It's not, it doesn't occupy any space mathematically. Let's put them in there anyway, just for the record. So what did we just saw? What did we just see? It was a representation, an animation of the Q sorting process from 2 individuals, one from Brazil, one from the United States, sorted in different years, never knew anything about each other. And yet what we have here is a physical evidence of not necessarily the same way of thinking, but certainly the same way of deciding what they like and what they dislike. I think that is amazing. That's what Q can do. Well, the rest of these slides compare visually the results of PCQ calculation and PQ method calculation. And I talked a long time about this, but I'll just put them up there so you can see them. There's a lot of similarity across these. The column in the 3 columns in the far left is PQ method centroids unrotated, and then comes PQ method centroids varimax, and then comes PQM principal components unrotated, and principal components varimax, and then PCQ centroids and PCQ centroids following a judgmental rotation. Then the results are very similar. There's some variance, but not a great deal. And that, of course, was good news for both Peter and I. We wanted to make sure that PQ method and PCQ were yielding similar results. So there's that 4th factor. That was one of the things that was interesting here. The centroid varimax and then all the rest of them did find a fourth factor. And in so doing, they accounted for more of the Q sorts. The PQM centroid unrotated, that's 3 factors, accounted for only 10 of the 14 sorts. That's probably the major difference between PCQ and PQ method. So, to sort of sum here, we can think about where we started. We've got 700 characters or 700 numbers up there, and those numbers represent a minuscule part of the possibilities, over 1 trillion different ways to sort 28 items. And yet we can come from that to where we have on the bottom of this slide, detailed, precise, visualized information that is useful to us as we try to understand color. Now, something I didn't say in my presentation was, to this very day, when I'm in a Walmart parking lot or wherever I am, I notice the colors, and the 5 most popular colors are black, white, red, gray, and silver. DuPont's worldwide study shows that accounts for about 80% of all the car paint they sell in the United States. It's for those those 5 colors, 80%. And last night we went by a big sports bar and looked out there, and guess what? They were all one or the other of those 5 colors, except for one that was yellow. Thanks very much. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry about that audio. I don't understand why that didn't work.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Let's give a round of applause, even though you can't hear us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's great, though. That gives us plenty of time to discuss. Is there anything else you wanted to add on to that, or any updates from the last time you gave that presentation before we dive into questions?
I think I talked over the head of a lot of my audience. Now, I kind of went in thinking that was probably going to happen. And the reason for that is not those people's fault at all. They haven't had any training. I mean, what kind of math background do people have to have these days? How much do they know about factor analysis anyway? And centroid, oh my God, they don't know anything about it, really. And that's sort of been, I've tried to work in that area and make people at least aware that it's worth thinking about the numbers. The most complicated number in all of centroid is a square root. Seriously, I mean, there's nothing magic about it at all. It's not complicated. It's not difficult mathematics. It's complicated enough that we want the computer to do it for us. And I've spent a lot of time in this area, and I feel confident that if more people had an understanding of the mechanics of what I call Q technique, the better off we would all be. And so I was trying, on the one hand, to spur everybody's imagination a little bit, but within the expectation that some of the people were going, what the hell is he talking about?
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm sure we'll get to all sides of that. What the heck were you talking about? And then other reflections. So I just want to open it up now for people to comment, question, share, and we'll just dive into it. So go ahead and jump on in as you feel ready.
Here, I'll jump in. Somebody's got to be first.
Hi, Sue.
Hey, Mike.
It would be helpful if everybody said, I'm Sue or I'm Joe or whoever.
I'm wondering how you feel. I can kind of get a feeling for it, but it seems like there are a lot of, we'll call them primers or books that kind of teach Q as kind of what I always call a cookbook method. Right. And then you go and you push these buttons to really, kind of.
Well,
And I'm
with
wondering
the
how you
computer,
think about that.
with the computer, it's the easiest thing in the world. It used to,
Right.
you had to be able to do all that before.
Mm-hmm.
Stevenson ran my data with a slide rule in his office one morning. And then
I'm
we
sure.
sent it over to the computer center for him to run it. But he knew what he had because he pulled his slide rule out and did it. I can't work the slide rule.
Me either. I can only add and subtract on a slide rule.
I don't know. When you and I talk about these things, Sue, we're preaching to the choir because I know that you've really done a lot to try to help people understand what the heck's going on here and how it works. And I think that's important.
Well, thank you. I try. It's not easy.
Nothing worthwhile is, right?
That's right. This is true. This is true. All right. Somebody else needs to ask a question.
I have a question, if I may. Hi, it's Renata.
Hi, Renata.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for the lovely presentation, and I love the colors. It makes life worth living. I have a question. You mentioned, and I know what a slide rule is. Don't know how to use it, but I know what it is. You mentioned about the PCQ and PQ method coming up with similar results, which is great. With new programs coming up and with perhaps fewer people knowing the slide rule, what happens with the newer method? Would they give a similar result? I'm assuming they do.
Know.
But okay, so
maybe somebody should run that little test.
Okay.
I bet it would get published.
You're giving us all ideas, Mike. All right, thank you. That's food for thought. And if I also may, a second question, I might as well put them all there. I often suggest when participants get very uptight and concerned about putting everything in the right spot, that the middle section can be in the grid can be a little fudge, so it doesn't all have to sit perfectly, as long as they have the outmost and
yes.
The plastic. Is that a good advice to give participants that get stressed?
This is what I said in the keynote address, and I didn't say today. So once again, Renata, that's two. You're the one that sparked the idea to do this to begin with, and now you kept me on track. Okay, let's talk about the middle pile. And you notice it's very clear that the middle pile mathematically doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean it doesn't need, it's a point. It doesn't occupy any space. It's almost, well, it's one. It's a single dimension. It's not even two dimensions. So that being said, does that mean that the middle pile doesn't mean anything? No, it's precisely the opposite. But before we get to that, let's remember how when we ask people to sort, there's going to be sorting the extremes first, the things they care about, positive and negative first, and then from what's left, they're going to be at, they have to make the same kind of decision, positive and negative. By the time you get to the middle pile, you're worn out. The things that are toward the middle, and if we got 9 piles, 11 piles, that's the middle 3 or 4, 3 or 5 piles don't matter very much mathematically because it's assumed that they don't matter very much to the sorter. They matter less than the things at the extremes. And thus, whenever we take them into account, it's almost indirectly that we learn that they teach us something. It's not that they don't teach us anything; they do. They tell us a lot. For example, in the study, in the color study that we showed, we found out from the visualizations that we should not put brown cars in our ads because people don't like brown. You see, let's put red cars and yellow cars, and the ones on the positive end of it. When somebody put colors in the middle, it just didn't matter. And in fact, it helped. That's what differentiates one factor from another. Remember the two women that made factor, whatever factor it was, the blue factor, what I think of as the blue factor. We saw how they did that. Well, by the time they're getting down to the middle, they've covered 80% of the importance, if you will, and they've only got that much left, and it's stuff they don't care about. What's the difference? Yeah, well, brown, yeah. It doesn't matter very much. And I did make the point also in that you're scrambling around, you've got all your Q sorts, and you're trying to get them all assembled the right way, and you find, oh my God, this guy, there's two different statements that are, or there's a statement listed twice in the -1 pile and in the 0 pile. What do I do? Oh my God. Well, what I said in the keynote address was, it's not important. It's arbitrary. Just set one to the other because they don't matter mathematically. I don't want to lose the idea, though, that the easy part of sorting is at the extremes, not when you get toward the middle. I gave it a glancing blow about it.
Yes. Hello, my name is Clara. Thank you, Mike. It was very interesting, and it was interesting especially to see how the color codes presented the factors in a way. I don't know if I said that the right way, but I was thinking when there was so strong color preferences. I was thinking about the Q discussion about color coding. Yes. And I was thinking that I have to admit that I haven't read that discussion that carefully, but I was thinking that you should definitely not put different colors on the cards. If people have so strong preferences, it might disturb the perception of the message.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I've been following that discussion too, and you think about it. Stevenson taught us measurements can be quite obtrusive, and Q, particularly the administering of a Q sorting, should be unobtrusive. Get the researcher back out of the picture. And if you color code all that, they're going to go, oh my God, pink and purple. My God, I don't like either one of those. And you see, it's going to have some influence on how they're going to sort. I mean, that seems to me to be apparent. And so, no, do not do that. Can you use color as the instrument? The Q sample? Absolutely, and it shows us things that we didn't know before, and it's a fun thing. I'm looking forward. Now that we're going to have a few more cars on the road coming up on 2022. Will I still see black, white, red, and gray as much? And I promise you, at least one of you
a cliffhanger there. Hopefully we have him come back. I'm gonna guess who says one of you has a black, white, red, or gray car. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Mike, we lost you for a second.
Oh, I'm sure it was not important. Did I answer you, Claire, or was I helpful?
Yes, you did. And but I was thinking that when you have the Q sort, it's and it's analyzed, then it's interesting to put it into colors like you have done. So
Exactly,
I think
and that's why I showed those two other examples. I mean, everybody that's read Steve Brown's book knows about the ellipsis study. Everybody. I mean, it's just, that's what that book's major study for me. And so I thought, well, gosh, let's represent that in colors. And there was only two dimensions that he had in the Q sample, and one was an American value dimension, and another one was a British value dimension. And they get sorted, and voila, we see some new, complicated, interesting relationships, and the colors help us identify those. Use the color for identification purpose to help you identify something. And with the burn study, which was a much more subtle and complicated matter, it really helped us. There's a lot of data when you had 54 Q sorters. That's a lot of data, and there were 50 items in each sort, and we didn't know who they were. We knew they were males or females, what their age was. We don't have any idea how severe their burns were.
Hi, Mike. This is Byung. Okay. Nice to see you on Zoom. Can you hear me?
I think he's frozen again. Maybe.
Okay.
We can hear you, Byung.
Okay. Okay. So you showed that diagram where your centroid result is different from that the PQM, the Peters. So the algorithm is the difference, or why? So I think Peter's version is based on some code in the Stephen Brown's book. And how about you are the code for PCQ centroid?
So sorry, I think we just lost him.
Okay.
And here he's logging back in. Let's just see, maybe give him just another moment here. As people have questions come up, you're also welcome to type them into the chat too, so that you keep them in mind. Mike, do we have you back there? We don't have video yet. Maybe we'll just give him just another moment or so. Okay, looks like he's logging in with another device. Just another moment here. Let's see if we get him back.
Sorry, I lost you.
Okay. So hi, Mike. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Okay. So I have a question that you show the diagram on which that the centroid method is result is different from the Peters. So I'm just wondering that where you got that algorithm for centroid method. Did you write it, or did you get some code from somewhere? I think the Peters one is based on the code in Stephen Brown's book. How about you?
The algorithms, all the algorithms that I use are based upon the part 2 of Steve's book. I augmented that by what I did. This was kind of an interesting little journey. I decided to go back to the 20s and look at all those factor analysis books and see what they did and how they taught. And that was fascinating too. But by far the clearest explanation I found was Steve Brown.
But if you are using the same code to write the program, I think that the result should be the same, don't you think?
Of course, unless there's some error in the application of the algorithm or errors in the mathematics. And that's what I was always worried about. I wanted to make sure that look, I'm not a professional mathematician nor programmer. So I wrote it in BASIC 1986 or so, 87. So it was pretty rude and crude. So I was delighted when Peter and I were able to compare the two software packages and come up with essentially the same results.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
It's really interesting, by the way, to go back and look at those old psychology textbooks. That's where most of it was. The old psychology textbooks. And by the 50s, everybody poo-pooed Centroid, of course. Centroid was, oh yeah, we used to do that, but we didn't have electricity, so we had to, it was a thing of the past. That was an interesting exploration. And today, I don't know anybody else in the world that's using Centroid. There may be some other people, but I don't try to track them or anything.
Yeah. In the old days, some books that came out in 1950s, they put all the code in the appendix. So
yes, and I did take a look at the coding and some of that. Still, the best thing by far was Steve. His algorithms were the most useful.
I didn't.
If I might.
Oh, go ahead there. That's what I was going to say. Go ahead.
That's right. I interrupt you. Go right ahead.
Oh, Steve, I didn't know you were here. Welcome. How are you?
I was just going to let you know he's here.
Yeah.
So glad you're here, Steve.
Well, I didn't want to miss it. I saw the first version of it. Where was that? At Salt Lake City? Where was it that you made that presentation originally?
It was in New Orleans, Louisiana.
New Orleans? New Orleans. Okay. But I was present for that one as well. I also still have a slide rule. I still know how to use it a little bit, although I also have an instruction booklet that goes along with it. I actually had two slide rules, and I dug them out the other day and found out that the one of them had lain fallow for so long it was rusted, and the leather case that it was had crumbled. So I just discarded that. But I still have one that worked. I think I got it from my father. So, but I would ask one thing here. The examples that you will take the ellipsis example. Incidentally, the factor analysis needn't be attributed to me because I got it from Stevenson's seminars when he showed us how to do it, and he took us through it. I still have that in my notes, and so I just replicated that. So you can attribute it to him, and he was very clear in his presentation as well. And that little paper of his on factor analysis that was in like the 4th volume of Operant Subjectivity was a handout that he used to give to his students at Oxford, because the psychologists back in those days were like journalism students at Missouri. That is, they were very high in verbal scores, but very low on quantitative. They didn't have a really strong quantitative background. And that's the way the psychologists were at Oxford, because it was largely a philosophical pursuit and not a social scientific pursuit. But the question I have, the example that you gave using the elliptic illustration, the colors were in terms of the Q sample structure. And Stevenson made clear that was based in variance analysis, and he never used variance analysis for the analysis of the data. The variance analysis was, or variance designs were to be used to compose a Q sample. But once you compose it, you throw it all away, and you focus in on the way that the person actually did the Q sort. So I'm wondering if by focusing on those color that represented like the British value system and the American value system, if that doesn't pull you back into the a priori experimental design structure, or what he referred to later, based on a study by McKay, was structural information as opposed to functional information. Functional information was how the person actually did the Q sort, and that might not have anything to do with either British or American values, because it's the Q sorter trying to express herself or himself. And so rather than having these chunks of color, a Q sort is more like a marbling, effect, if you're wanting to keep with a visual kind of analogy, because the Q sorter is the factorial design, or the experimental design structure doesn't have any self-reference in it. These are British values, these are American values. Those are just definitions. But when the Q sorter actually says, which ones of these do I like, you're getting something new that's in the mix, namely self-reference. And so that if you were to keep to a visual analogy, it seems to me you would have some more like marbling. It's like the Q sorter takes the red and the blue and so forth and throws all that paint together and then starts painting with that, but that's a composite of all of those colors, and it no longer has anything to do with the colors. It has to do with the self-references of the Q sorters. So I wonder if, one, whether you agree with that, and two, if there would be any kind of way were you to reprise this a third time, whether you could somehow go from the blocks of color, which represent the experimental design structures, to some kind of different use of color. When the child does something with color, they smear all the colors. They get their hands with the blue paint, the yellow paint, the green paint, and so forth, and they smear it. It's all smeared as the child tries to express himself or herself. And the Q sorter is doing something similar. And I think that's where Stevenson's reference to the Sontag rule, to see more, feel more, hear more, that if you jump to conclusions based on British versus American values, if you'll recall that third factor in the Lipschitz study involved, I can't remember exactly what I said about it, but it involved cynicism. These were people who were cynical about America. We say we're in favor of equality, but we really aren't. And so they were poo-pooing the American values. So although you could still represent that in terms of blues and greens and brown and so on and so forth, they were really trashing all of that. And the trashing was in the self-reference. That wasn't in the Q sample structure. That was something they added to it.
Well, by the way, I had to be admitted again. I missed some of what you said. I think the thrust of what you're talking about, of course, is right. Look, what I'm trying to do is to lift the numbers off the page. And I think you understand that. And yes,
I do.
But you're describing a level of it's like I feel like a junior partner whenever I come to compare myself to what you're talking about. You're much more sophisticated in thinking about that. What I'm trying to think about, it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting whenever you do these studies and you find out that the theories were not nearly as they were purported to be. Mm-hmm. And that's just the truth of the matter. Mm-hmm. And you run, but we're not testing the theory per se. We're testing the communicability of the theory. And what we learn, of course, is the communicability is an entirely different thing than, some imported paper. All I'm trying to do is to lift the numbers up. And I don't know what to do next because I'm not that good. I use, paint to make that stuff.
Well, I think we're both on the same page. I'm not trying to undermine what you've done at all.
Oh, no, I know that. I realize.
Fully support it. you're showing how the mechanics of it works. But then
Exactly.
I think you have to say the next step is, well, you know, in Wittgenstein, when he says, if you understand me correctly, this is on the last page of the tract.
Exactly.
If you understand me correctly, you've got to pull up the ladder,
That's right.
you know, at the end. And Stevenson also said in that paper of his, the Introduction to Q Methodology, that was actually taken as a chapter out of one of his unpublished book manuscripts. And so it was in one of the later volumes of Operant Subjectivity. But he was saying why it was that we had to not use variance analysis. We use variance designs up to the point of comprising the Q sample, but then when analyzing the data, we use factor analysis because factor analysis more closely mirrors the way the human thought, as opposed to variance analysis, which just has it in these blue and green and yellow chunks.
Yes.
But that actual thought is more fluid, more dynamic than those. So I think it's merely reminding the viewer that everything that you're saying, I think, is perfectly correct, and Stevenson, you know, would agree. But I remember Charlie Stevenson used to look at the manuscripts before we published them in Operant Subjectivity, and with that particular article of his father's, William Stevenson, he said it was sort of like William Stevenson allowed Fisher, R.A. Fisher, to be on stage up to a point, and then you reached out with a hook and grabbed him by the neck and yanked him off the stage. You didn't allow variance analysis to control how you were going to analyze the data. That was the domain of factor analysis.
Yes.
Because variance analysis is merely going to mirror those a priori categories that you started off with. It's not going to take you anywhere. It's going to leave you right where you were. And so,
but see, for the R analysis, that's what they hope.
Oh yes, those are the hypotheses, but they end up just being able to say whether my hypothesis was right or wrong, but it can't tell you what else may be going on that is nearly the null, that is not either the null hypothesis nor its alternative. It's something different.
It belongs in the unimagined category.
Yeah, something that's unimagined, and with t-test and variance analysis and so forth, you can't show those other hypotheses. The things that are going on in the heads of the Q sorter, for instance, are not necessarily in the explanatory structure of the analyst. And that's also the Achilles heel, I think, of many qualitative theorists too, because they end up imposing categories on the verbiage that they get from these interviews.
And what Q does is to unveil, I like that word, unveil the operant.
That's right.
Labels.
That's right. What's really going on?
There's nothing wrong with labels. What's wrong is how you arrive at them.
Yeah, and whether the things that you're labeling are functional categories or just structural categories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was reminded when you talked about Jacob. I thought of Jacob's ladder, and I thought, oh my goodness, how in the world would Jacob's ladder how would he pull up his ladder when he got to the top of it? We'll leave that for the theologians, I suppose.
Yeah.
Hello, Marcel. Surely you have something to say.
Yes, I saw Marcel there.
Me too. Happy to see you, because a couple years since the last time.
True.
3 years, 3 years, I guess. And my bottle of wine is still on the table. I just want to ask you, often in the past, I use is a resemblance with what Mike present, often contrast the factorial analysis result with the, I used the cluster analysis to see what's the distance, the real distance between each Q sort. And it's often gave me a better view about the characteristic of my sample that fill out the questionnaire. But cluster analysis is not the same, concept behind than the factor analysis we use. But I would like to apply your approach, Mike, with his view about, but I have to learn how you work. I should go a trip in your hometown to get a course, which you don't charge too much.
For those of you who don't know Marcel, I can't wait for you to have the opportunity to know him. He's an interesting man. He's a psychologist in French-speaking Canada, as we people of English heritage like to say. And he has worked with children and of course the families of children for many, many years. And he's quite innovative. The way he uses pets, for example, small, animals. And so he came upon Q, and of course he doesn't do it right, but he gets good results, but he doesn't do it right. He happens to get to the right place, but I don't know how he gets there. And then he works with these families, and he has a sense of the operacy that's, operately what's going on here. And that's one of the beauties of what Stevenson did. Not only does he allow us to stand back and be academicians and all that business, he also allows us to be practicing professionals and use the methodology to improve our practice. And Marcel is a really perfect example of that. Isn't that correct, Marcel? I hope I know I didn't underrate you.
I'm not a star like you and Stephen. I'm just a junior researcher. But the contact with you learned me lots across the years. I just
thank you so much.
Take the moment to thank you.
Thank you.
Both of you.
This is turning into a valedictory. Hello, Diane. I know you got something to say. You've unmuted. Diane has unmuted her microphone.
No, it's because my dog left the room.
Oh.
Otherwise he'd be barking. But what I think has been so important when I teach Q methodology is to recognize that there's three major stages. One is that technique of sorting, getting that sort to work. And this is in Steve Brown's book on page 161, and or something around there. And then that middle one, that's method, that really has to do with the statistics. And that's what I think Mike's showing us today is statistically what is happening with those items. And then the beauty of Q methodology is the methodology. And that's what Steve was talking about. Here I am interpreting the experts, but Steve was saying that it's more than that structure. Mm-hmm. It's that interpretation of what is happening with self-reference. Mm-hmm. So because that's so important, and because I've taken a lot of students to committees, doctoral and masters, mostly doctoral, and committees with both quantitative and qualitative researchers on them, we really focus on this methodology and the importance of interpretation, but somebody always wants to know how the theory relates. And that's where Steve's or Mike's structure now can be helpful to color code the theory or whatever it is that particular person might be interested in post interpretation, which really is the guts of methodology, communicability, and operancy. So that's what I have to say. And I'm sorry if I interpreted the experts incorrectly, but that's I think how you have to start teaching people who are just getting into it for the first time.
Well, Stevenson, I forget where I read this or heard him say it, or somebody said it. You can start with Q anywhere you want to, and it's true. I mean, it covers the whole playing field. You see, I mean, You can start in any corner of the playing field and you can get into it and go wherever you want to go. But one of the places that people can walk around today without knowing very much, indeed, is the mechanical part of it. And yes, the computer does all the donkey work, but it's the researcher who does the interpretation. And by the way, in that little color study that was on, I didn't properly note, there are Oklahoma State students and University of POE students, and Diane's students did the sorts. In, I guess it was the Q seminar that year, wasn't it?
Yeah, and what's interesting about it is you had Volkswagen Beetles.
That's right.
That's
right. What they were sorting were Volkswagen Beetles. It was very playful. You know, you receive this letter in the mail from Volkswagen USA or Volkswagen Brazil saying, "Congratulations, we have a prize for you. It's an original Volkswagen Beetle. All you have to do is tell us which color you like best, which one you want."
Yeah, so remember, those are colors for a car, which I think is important for that.
That is important.
Yeah, because like otherwise, if it would be like, this is the gown you're going to wear to the ball for inaugurating the president, it would be a very different color scheme.
It's true. Quite true. Quite true.
Condition of instruction is important.
Very. And let's don't forget, conditions of instructions are not filters. They are boundary conditions. That's all they are. You know, they're telling us there's a path up the mountain, stay on the path.
Okay, sorry, I have to jump in here, so because we're right at time. So on that note, I put the link into the chat for anyone that found us today and hasn't had a chance to sign up. But if you sign up on that link, you can get invitations to future seminars. And then I'd like to invite everyone here to join us again this next week, and it'll just be a little bit more Q&A, and we can keep deep diving into these topics. I'm sure people have more questions and thoughts for Mike. Mike, will you be at this one this next week?
I will. Let me please, before we have to cut off, thank you so much, everybody. I was absolutely delighted to have the opportunity and to be able to see some people who really have been important in my life. It was a valedictory for me. Thank you so much, Mika, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much,
Say
Mike.
hi to Sherry.
I will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Marcel. Mon ami.
Take care.